Hello, 12th class IC students. Vandana Shirvasto welcomes you all in a succeeding class of poetry with the poem Birches by Robert Lee Frost. Before we move on, let us be introduced with our great American poet and writer Robert Lee Frost. Robert Lee Frost, born on March 26, 1874, in San Francisco, America, was a great American poet. He is highly regarded for his realistic portrayal of rural life and his expertise on American colloquial speech. A four-time Pulitzer winner in poetry, Frost had achieved a coveted position as one of the most prominent poets in the United States. Frost wrote most of his poetry in England during the Victorian era. This was the time when new genre and meters of poetry were being introduced, which Frost used in his poems. Simplicity is the hallmark of Frost's poems. Frost believes in reality, which is enriched with optimism. Dramatic qualities, crafting wonderful dramatic monologue or dramatic scenes, are aptly presented in Frost's poems. He tried to go beyond the seen to unseen. He employs lyric form in many of his best known poems, like Stopping by Woods, On a Snowy Evening, The Road Not Taken. His ambition was to use the everyday speech of New Englanders to capture their voice with all its rich innotations. Birches was written by Robert Frost during one of the most destructive wars, the First World War in history. It was first published in Atlantic Monthly in 1915 and was later collected in Frost's third collection of poetry, Mountain Interval, that was published in 1916. It is a lyric poem as Frost shows his emotions about childhood. Frost has a descriptive style, using vivid imagery and figurative language to appeal to the reader's senses. In this poem, The Birches, the theme is childhood. The feeling of childhood is not forever. One eventually has to grow and discover reality. In poem Birches, Frost uses the metaphor of an upright tree being close to heaven and therefore fantasy, while a bent tree is close to the ground and reality. The metaphor is used to show that in order to live a good life, one must have a balance of reality and fantasy. In form, Birches is a nature lyric. It is simple, at least on the surface level, and embodies one single emotional experience. It deals with one of the most familiar sights in nature in New England, the sight of birches which can go up and down. Birds swinging by boys is a common experience in England. Now let us go with the substance of the poem to comprehend it nicely. The poem means the poet watches the bent down birches and comes to imagine that some boy might have resorted to birch swinging, and as such the birches are bent down. Then he realizes that the branches of birches are bent down with the load of the ice after a snowstorm. He goes on describing the scene in detail. And then he recalls how the rural boys swing birches in their spare time. Once he too enjoyed going up and down on a birch when he was a boy. He wants to do the boy's act of swinging on these trees. His wish to go up results from his desire to escape from wheels and woes of his life. But he does not want to remain up. He wants to come down back on the earth to do his earthly duties. So, children, we have seen that the poet has very beautifully used the symbols in describing his poem Birches. Birches in the poem have symbolic import. The upward movement of birches symbolizes the higher ideals and spiritual aspirations, whereas their downward movement symbolizes coming back to earth, that is reality. Heaven symbolizes the perfect word, whereas earth symbolizes the world of harsh reality. So we have seen, children, the main theme of this poem is that the climbing birches is a sort of push towards transcendence, means the act of moving beyond physical realities. And then complete transcendence means never to come back to the ground level. But the speaker rejects the extreme of imagination and reinforces his ties with the earth. As a tree is rooted in the ground, in climbing it, one does not completely separate his connection with the earth. Thus, one's path up and down the birch is the one that is good, both going and coming back. Thus, the poet has used birches to compare his childhood pursuits of climbing birches to the physical and emotional rigors of adult life. He longs for the childhood days to escape the pressures of life. Not in the sense of dying, but by partaking the refreshing dose of birth climbing. In this way, he will be able to go to the innocence and beauty of nature, get refreshed, and return to the everyday grind of life on earth. So, dear students, today we have gone with the introduction of the poet and about the substance of the poem Birches. In our next meet, we will go with the explanation of the poem in detail. Till then, have a nice time. Thank you.